see my screen now. Thank you for attending this talk, everyone. My name is Dr. Siong. Most of the cycling people will call me Dr. Siong. My patients will call me Dr. Hing. I've been volunteering with the Singapore Cycling Federation for the past 8 years, and also practicing as a doctor in a family practice somewhere in Ang Mo Kio. So over the years, we have actually seen more and more cyclists taking to the roads. So today's talk, I'm going to touch on cycling in Singapore, where we can cycle. I'm going to talk about common injuries and management tips. I think also most important, I also will actually talk about safe practices on cycling. So we know prevention is better than cure. So I rather we talk a bit on that than to talk about recovery after an accident. Okay, so cycling, like Dr. Li Shen has mentioned, is a growing sport in Singapore, especially over the COVID period. I think currently there's been a survey done now. It's the third most popular sport in Singapore after walking and running. In Singapore, I must say that after cycling around the world, we have fantastic cycling infrastructure. We have a lot of roads where you can cycle on, park connectors. I think most of you are familiar with park connectors. There are pavements and shared paths. I think for roads, generally, the more experienced riders will take to the roads. Whether you're cycling fully on the road or sometimes there are people who ride on park connectors, and in between, they need to get onto the road to get onto another park connector. The park connector systems in Singapore are probably one of the best. They are with the national parks, and they do cover very great areas, up to 300 kilometers in Singapore. Okay, so why do we cycle? There are many health benefits to cycling. I think the reason why I cycle probably is to reduce stress. It's psychologically good for me. I cycle 3 to 4 times a week. I feel better after I cycle, but there are many other reasons. It protects you, gives you protects your muscle mass. It gives you better cardiovascular health. Improves your joint mobility, helps your immune system. It even prevents cancer by reducing body weight and fat, strengthens your bone, improves your coordination. So actually the list is quite comprehensive. Just like any form of exercise, I think cycling is one that people may choose. Okay, so cycling in Singapore, we talked about park connectors. What are park connectors? So if you look at the pictures below, actually there are a lot of beautiful cycling paths in Singapore. It can be on mountain bike trails, it can be on the roads and park connectors. If you look at park connectors, these are usually for more for beginners. The reason why I'm going through all these different areas is because you get different accidents and you get different kinds of injuries when you are on different cycling paths. So park connectors, trails that are connecting different green corridors and links around different estates. They connect all the major estates, and if you go to the Park Connect, the National Parks website, you can actually find this very beautiful map. You can plan your ride. I've tried a few. The Railway Corridor is one of the very beautiful places where you can cycle, and then up on the north side there is the Coney Island trails, and on the south you have the trails around the Botanic Gardens and going to Sentosa. So besides the park connectors, there are also trails where you can cycle on islands. So there are a few islands that you can actually cycle on. There's Pulau Ubin, Sentosa, Coney Islands, Lazarus Islands. They provide a different kind of challenge because there's lots of potential wild animals. Later we'll see in one of the scenarios how even wild animals can cause accidents while you're cycling. Nature reserves. So some people prefer to ride mountain bikes. So there's another group of riders who to take to the trails. They're beautiful. You can see that's the top picture is Bukit Timah Trail, and the bottom one is Track 15. I do ride on them quite often. These trails actually they give different challenges because they are very technical. So the injuries tend to come from people who are not experienced and riding on these trails. And then the last one, of course, are roads. I think nowadays a lot of cyclists actually are taking to the roads. In Singapore, I think the government is pushing towards a car-like future. So there are more and more people are actually cycling. There's increasing cycling infrastructure that are being developed. And during the COVID period, more people have actually come on and bought bicycles, and they're more cycling on the roads. If you look, the bottom picture is a very popular route. It's around Mandai area. Then we are cycling in Marina Bays, and then there's also around the Seletar Dam. So injuries can be classified into two types for this talk. There's the non-accidental injuries and the accidental one. I know today's talk is about World Trauma Day, so that would be accidental injuries, but I think I also touch on the non-accidental injuries because actually these are injuries that are more common than the non-accidental ones. So these are the 10 most common non-accidental injuries. If you go from the left to the right, you have ankle pain. I think if any of you have cycled increasing distances, if you do not have a proper bike fit, these are things that are very commonly seen. Saddle sores, hip pain, lower back pain, AC joint, so that's a shoulder joint sprain, and then neck pain. A lot of people get neck pain, forearm pain, arm pain, knee pain. Some people get foot numbness. So I know it sounds terrible, but it's not as bad as it seems. Most of these injuries are rare unless you're not properly fitted out. So if you're properly fitted out, you have to choose the right equipment. So very quickly, I'll just go through some equipments that I think are important when you take up cycling, and even more important if you cycle more and more. So number one is helmets. I can't stress more on helmets. I think not only wearing a helmet is important, but actually getting the right helmet and making sure that it fits correctly is important. Quite often we see small children wearing adult-sized helmets, so that's not a very good idea. So it's always important that you get the right fit. So there are a good selection of children's helmets, for example, even in Decathlon. They're affordable and very cheap. And for the Asians, we have Asian fit helmets. So there are certain brands that you can wear, and the helmets are the correct size. Helmets, just remember, they should be replaced regularly. There's always an expiry date, usually 2 to 3 years, and the material is no longer as protective as before. And also after an accident, do replace your helmets. I think correct clothing, I think the emphasis is more on be careful not to have loose and baggy clothing that can get caught inside the bicycle chains. So proper attire and correct attire is important. And do avoid flip-flops and sandals because they tend to slip while you're cycling and they can cause a fall. Okay, bike fitting. I think bike fitting is something that can be done when you buy a bicycle from the bike shop. A lot of the problems that we discussed earlier, the back pain, neck pain, a lot of times, or the saddle pain, the back, they come because they come about because you do not have a proper bike fit. So if you get the correct bike fit with the correct angle and the seat height and the seat position, a lot of those problems can be actually prevented. And then the last one, I think saddles, with saddle sores. As you ride more, a lot of people get buttock pain, saddle sores, ulcers. It's really quite a trial and error. There are many saddles in the market. Unfortunately, you need to try them. If they can provide you with a sample to try before you actually choose and buy one, that would be the best. Okay, so now we talk about types of accidents that we commonly see. This is more from, I think I took it from certain statistics in different countries, including Singapore. Most accidents that actually occur while you're riding are actually self-errors, meaning that you're not hit by a car or anything, you're just cycling and you fall. A lot of different things can cause that. One of the common ones is actually you're not aware of the roads. There are grills, grades, so the roadway is not in a good condition. There are potholes and there are gravel. So I think cycling experience and cycling at the right speed is quite important. The other thing that causes accidents are equipment failure. So always make sure that your bicycle is in a good condition. Check your bicycle before you start riding. Quite often, the tires are not properly pumped up, or the treads are really quite worn out, or your handlebar or your frame may be cracked. So it's important that you have good equipment. Collision with fixed objects. So the other thing I see is a lot of people cycling on park connectors and they hit things that they're not aware of. Sometimes there's a small little curb, or there are terminal boxes on the side, or sometimes even a road sign in the middle of the road they hit. So these are all the things where they are all considered self-errors. And a lot of accidents happen because of that. And of course, the one that we see, collision with motor vehicles, that takes up about only 20% of accidents. However, in that 20% of accidents, most of the serious injuries happen within that 20%. So in a collision with a motor vehicle, especially if the vehicle is moving fast, or you do get very high rates of and very severe accidents, and 50% of those accidents always end up with quite serious injuries or patients going to the hospital. Okay, then the last one, I put it in is like animal involvement, like a dog running out, or a snake or monitor lizard. Actually, that takes up 3 to 4% in Singapore, because Singapore is like on the mountain bike trails and on the park connectors where we cycle. There are quite a bit of things like dogs, monitor lizards, there are otters. So you have to be rather careful when you cycle as well and be aware of wild animals. Okay, so before we move on to the scenarios, I will just discuss the typical injuries that you can see with cycling accidents, and later while we're doing the scenarios, we can discuss which of these injuries we think will happen. Okay, so one of the commonest injuries that you see in cycling is the head injury. And the reason why we're talking about the head injuries in bicycle accidents is the way a cyclist will fall. If there's any accident involving the front wheel or involving the locking of the front wheel, what happens is the cyclist is usually thrown over the handlebar. And when you are thrown over the handlebar, things that tend to hit the floor first will be your upper arms, your limbs, your shoulders, or your head. So with head injuries, depending on your speed, you can have a lot of different injuries. The most common are skull fractures, concussions. With skull fractures and concussions, you can have brain contusion, that means brain injuries. Sometimes there's a brain bleed, so we call those intracranial hemorrhages, and other traumatic brain injuries. And also your face, when it hits the floor, you can get facial fractures around your face area. You can get dental fractures. I've seen one case where after the patient fell, his tooth was actually on the road. Then we have eye injuries like corneal abrasions, foreign bodies in the eye, and also contusion to the face. Okay, and the next one we have musculoskeletal injury. So fractures, usually you see cyclists, they have collarbone fractures because that's what hits the floor first. Sometimes they have dislocation of the shoulder or the AC joint. Some of them do get rib fractures as well. These are all the upper body fractures. Okay, so chest, we have rib fractures. In more severe chest injuries, you have lung damage. You get some lung parenchyma injuries. And in more serious injuries, we do see pneumothoraxes as well. That means a puncture in the lung. Okay. Moving down the body, sometimes you get abdominal injuries. So in certain car accidents, if the patient, the cyclist is run over by vehicles, you get intra-abdominal injuries and bleeding. Another common injury seen is actually urethra and vulvar injuries. I know it sounds a bit embarrassing, but there are many parts of the bicycle that protrude. So sometimes you do get hit in your nether regions, whether for a woman or for a man. And there's also rectal trauma and pelvic fractures. So pelvic fractures are when there's instability and a fracture to your pelvis. Okay? So the most common, of course, when injuries are not so severe, I think everyone's familiar with it. Whether you have a small fall or spill or you crash, you get lots of skin and soft tissue abrasions on your arms and legs. Yeah, I know that sounds quite morbid. So just bear in mind all these injuries. I'm just going to go through some case scenarios. So this happened when I think I was driving to work. This is just outside Tan Tock Seng Hospital. So we have, okay, I'm going to play the video. Let's have a look at it. Okay, no reaction. You saw the accident? So let's try that one more time. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay, one more time. Okay, so there's no doubt the cyclist is cycling on the zebra crossing. I don't think he was cycling too fast. It's a reasonable speed. Unfortunately, he was not seen by the taxi. Okay, if you look at this picture in this collision, the first thing that has happened is his head has hit the windscreen. Fortunately, he's wearing a helmet, so I think that protects the back of his head. All right, and the next thing that you see is that he lands on the floor, he hits his head again, and also he lands on his back, his buttocks, and his arms. So I didn't show the rest of the video, but for this particular patient, I think he was fine. He managed to get up because it was a low impact accident, but he did probably get the possible injuries that he can get was he hit his head. Fortunately, the helmet probably saved most of the force there. He also landed on his left shoulder, so the possible injuries you can get is a strained shoulder. If he was more unfortunate, he probably could get a fractured clavicle and maybe some injuries on his left ribs. But fortunately, he got up and he was fine. Okay, this second video is a cyclist was hit by a rather fast-moving vehicle from behind. Let's have a look at this. Okay, so we can see that it's very likely that the injuries were much more severe. Sorry, I think I can't pause it. Okay, so this patient was conveyed to hospital. The injuries were much more severe. I think the speed that the taxi hit the patient was probably about 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. We can see from the video that actually the patient hit her head on the floor first. And not only that, she probably did a single bounce. So she bounced twice on her head. So she had a skull fracture. She had pretty intracranial bleed. There was a fracture on the right clavicle and several fractured ribs as well. So it took a while for the patient to recover. Okay, so moving to the next case. So one day I got a call from some of the cyclists who were on the scene because they recognized the patient and they wanted us to contact the family. So this was a patient who was cycling along Tanah Merah Coastal Road. I'm not sure any of you have cycled along that road before. So it's the leftmost lane is supposed to be predominantly reserved for cyclists, but there was a vehicle that was parked there, which was a truck. Unfortunately, for a lot of cyclists who are training there, sometimes when they're riding, they look down and they do not actually look up. And in this particular case, the cyclist was looking down and he went and cycled into the back of this truck at a full speed. So I think he was conveyed to the hospital actually unconscious. So he had quite severe injuries to his head, to his face, because that's what hit the back of the lorry first. So he had some fractures, some facial fractures, which he had to go for surgery with. He had a small intracranial bleed. He had a fracture to his cervical neck, to his spine, and some injuries to his back as well. He had a pneumothorax on his left lung, and he had multiple abrasions as well. He did recover after a period of time. You can see that the injuries are quite severe, and you can see from the bicycle as well. Sometimes the bicycle does show you how severe the injury is. When the bicycle is badly damaged, I think the person tends to be pretty damaged as well. All right. And then we're talking about being aware of the environment. And in this particular case, I think you may be familiar with it. This was just a while ago. I think it was in the papers. There was a cyclist who was cycling along the road, and we were all generally cyclists are all told to keep as left as possible. Unfortunately, I think he kept to the left too much, and his wheel got caught in the grating. When the front wheel gets caught, remember I mentioned that you tend to be thrown over the handlebar. So in this particular case, this patient was thrown over the handlebar and he landed on his neck as well. So he had neck and back injuries. He recovered, but he managed to, it became a court case, and I think LTA kind of settled out of court with him. Okay, so the last case that I want to bring up is to show you that even cycling on park connectors, it can be dangerous. So in Singapore, there are quite a lot of animals. In over here, you can see that it's quite unfortunately there is a monitor lizard that died in the front wheel. He got caught in the front bicycle wheel, and fortunately, the patient was wearing actually a helmet because she was thrown over the handlebar. She lost consciousness for a while, and then people came to help. The ambulance came to pick her up. I think she had a fractured left clavicle and some concussion, but she recovered fully. Okay, so this is very important now. These are practical tips. What do you do in a cycling accident? It depends very much whether you are alone or you're cycling in a group. I will encourage everybody to cycle in a group because if something happens, there are people there to help you. But if you're cycling alone, it's quite often there'll be other cyclists around. So if you were cycling and you see a cyclist unconscious on the floor, what should you do? So the first thing that you should do is make warning signs around the accident. So before you assist the cyclist, always make sure that you are also not in danger because probably it's an open road, or if it's a park connector, it tends to be quite safe. But if it's an open road, be careful. There may be other cars or lorries coming. So make sure that you don't end up with two patients instead of one patient. So one of the things you can do is put your bicycle further up the road with the light blinking so that cars are aware. Then the next thing, turn your attention to the victim. If there's somebody around, get them to call the ambulance at the same time while you assess the patient. So as with any unconscious patient who's injured, ABCs, I'm not sure whether you remember. So basically look for the airway, make sure that patient is breathing, and then make sure that the patient's circulation is there. So secure the person's airway and circulation, make sure that he's breathing, there's a pulse. If there's any bleeding, stop the bleeding immediately, and then do CPR if required. Look out for any signs of head injury or brain injury. Try not to move the patient as much as possible, and then call for help. I think if you're the only person on scene, it's best not to do too much unless if the patient is stable, call for help and wait for the ambulance to arrive. Okay, so management of injuries, right? So if the person is just slightly injured and he can get back home, the management of injuries tend to be very simple. When you get back home, I'm sure you remember this ice treatment. It's called RICE. So you rest the injured area, you ice it, you compress the injured area, and you elevate it. And it can be also used for small bruises. Okay. So for minor cuts, so road rash or cuts, you can stop the bleeding by applying some pressure, put some gauze over it, clean the wound. Remember to remove all the debris as much as possible, because if you leave it in there, it tends to be part of the skin. You will end up with a lot of scarring over the wound. Then apply a thin layer of antiseptic cream. And even if you get home and if you find that injury is worse than you thought, there's some pain, swelling, bruising, and it hurts a lot, it's good to seek professional treatment. Go down to a clinic or to the A&E to see a doctor. Okay, so I'm coming to the last part of the talk now. We've talked about trauma, we talked about injuries, and now I think we should concentrate on how to prevent injuries. So as cyclists, I think the most important thing is you should try defensive riding. I know it's difficult if you're training. There's some people out there who are training hard and they have their Strava on and they're trying to beat the record. Don't just do it only when the roads are quieter and it's safer. Do not put your life at risk. If there is a heavy traffic, it's peak hours, that's something that you should try to avoid. Okay, when you're cycling, be very aware of your surroundings. Be careful of holes in the floor, grates on the floor, slippery roads, right? Follow traffic rules and especially traffic lights. I think in the past, we used to see cyclists beating traffic lights. We still see it nowadays, but less and less now. I think cyclists are becoming more and more careful with all the new road safety acts and with the new rules and the implementation of rules by traffic police now. So always follow traffic rules so that there's a reason why it's there is for your safety. Moving down, service your equipment. I think equipment is very important. Make sure your bicycles and your equipment are in very good condition. Sometimes accidents, like I said, happen when your equipment are not properly serviced. And then cycling attire, wear the correct cycling attire. Make sure you don't wear a skirt when you're cycling, or wear loose baggy pants. They can get caught in the bicycle and can really have a terrible fall unnecessarily. So be extra careful when you're riding at night. There are a few things that you can try to do. Nowadays, the law requires you to put lights on when it's in the dark. So front and back light, that will improve your visibility. Also at night, because reactions are poorer, make sure you wear bright clothing so that cars and other cyclists can see you. And then the last one, in wet conditions, do not ride as fast because the road conditions are not as good. Stopping the bicycle takes longer. Braking surfaces are wet and they take a longer time to stop as well. Okay, and the last thing I'll go through is actually plan your route. So I think planning your route is important. When you look at your route from A to B, always choose routes that are safe. They're away from major highways, or, well, you can't ride on highways, but major roads. Take back streets and plan routes where you have park connectors if you want to have a more pleasant ride. Okay, so I made some videos with some friends. I'm just going to play them through. I think we have time for these 3 short videos. They're pretty good to give you a general view of how to ride safely. Okay, first video.
Like everything in life, the more prepared you are, the more likely you are to succeed. Cycling is no different. Whether you're commuting to work, going for a nice ride, or training with your friends, planning yourself, your bike, and your route will allow you to get to your destination in a safe and enjoyable way. Let's take you through the 3-point pre-ride checklist so you're prepared for a great ride. Prepare yourself before your ride. First, you need your gear. Check if your helmet is functional. Wear bright clothing, gloves, and shoes. Prepare water and food if it's a long ride. Bring ID, your phone, and some cash in case of emergency. Some riders will supplement their lights with additional reflective clothing, especially for commuters. Before your next ride, check your bike. Your tires, your wheels, your gears, your lights. Make sure the tires are pumped up and there are no cuts in the tires. Your wheels are true and spin freely. Gears are smooth and your chain has lubricant. Your lights are charged, even for daytime riding. Everything on your bike is tight and tidy. There are important questions to ask yourself before you get going. For instance, where are you going? How far are you going? Who are you going with? What will the terrain be like? Consider if there is a smarter or safer way to get there. Be road smart. Finally, make sure you get a good night's sleep and give yourself plenty of time to wake up. Most accidents happen within the first few kilometers away from home when people are not as alert. We hope this video has helped you prepare your route, yourself, and your bike for a fun and safe ride, no matter where you're headed.
Okay, hope that's useful. That's a good friend of mine, Megan Kinder. Yes, so she's the ex-president of ENZA Cycling. All right, so the next video, we're talking about accidents, how to deal with accidents. I think this has very good tips. Let's have a watch.
Cycling brings its fair share of dangers, and the cyclist is a relatively exposed and vulnerable road user.
One of the best ways of avoiding incidents is by riding defensively, which allows you to anticipate potential hazards, giving you a better chance of avoiding injury. Never assume a driver has seen you. They can be distracted, careless, or unable to gauge your approaching speed. Always stay left, stay alert, and make eye contact with the driver. Sometimes, incidents can't be avoided. If it's a mechanical issue, pull over safely to the side of the road and assess the situation. Continue your journey once the issue is rectified.
If it's beyond your mechanical ability or you don't have a spare, find alternative means to get home. That's why pre-journey preparation is important. Sometimes, incidents can involve other road users.
In situations like this, it's always best to remain calm, reasonable and non-confrontational. Sometimes, incidents can become accidents when there is contact with another vehicle.
If you or someone you see has been involved in one, get off the road as soon as possible.
Call an ambulance or the police.
If the injury is serious,
Ensure that details such as IC, registration plate and handphone numbers are exchanged at the scene. Then lodge a police report within 24 hours.
you can have a smooth journey on the way home. Remember, a little respect goes a long way in making sure that everyone gets home safe. Please share the road.
Okay, very useful tips on what to do in a real traffic accident. Yeah. So this is the last video I will share.
Being safe on the road is all about being predictable. Whether you're a driver or a cyclist, we need to follow the road rules and keep surprises to an absolute minimum. Here are a few situations where surprises can end in injury. When approaching a pedestrian crossing, look both ways and try to make eye contact with pedestrians as they sometimes cross without looking. Likewise, make eye contact with other road users to let them know that you are there. A smile doesn't hurt either. Do not cycle in between a parked car and a curb. Instead, keep a safe distance from the door zone. Remember, it's not the car, it's the people getting out. When approaching the bus stop with a bus, make sure to slow down. Taking the time to wait patiently behind is the safest thing to do. Be wary of blind spots of large vehicles. Give them space as they will always win in an accident. When making a right turn at a junction, communicate with fellow road users by signaling early. Check to make sure it is safe before changing lanes slowly, one at a time. Keep to the leftmost right turning lane and adopt a wider turning radius to allow space for cars to overtake you on the right. On-road cycling can be dangerous, but it doesn't have to be if you ride safe and respect your fellow road users. Remember, surprises are great for birthdays, but not on the road. Please share the road.
Alright, I think that's the last video. I'm going to end my talk already because I think I'm running over a little bit. There's a few things I wanted to say about Singapore Cycling Federation. So basically, we are a charity and we are representing the cyclists in Singapore. So if there's anything that anybody needs anybody needs review on, please feel free to contact us. All right, thank you very much.